Making torsion springs reliably and repeatably for your projects isn't that difficult. If you want to learn how, stick around. We'll help you get a handle on things. Some projects require a spring that's pretty specific in its design, or maybe it's pretty expensive to purchase one pre-made. Now, the torsion springs that we need for our project today are of our own design. That means they're not available anywhere online. We had to make our own if we wanted them. I'll show you how we did that. This is a spring bender. There's two parts to it. There's a handle and there's a base. The base is held in a vise and the handle fits over the base. This part is called a mandrel. The mandrel diameter is chosen based on the diameter of the bend that you want to make. In this particular case, we wanted a 5/8 inch bend, so a 5/8 inch mandrel was inserted into this block and then welded down. This is a hardened bolt that's been threaded into the base block and then the head has been cut off. The purpose of this bolt is to create a backstop for your wire that you're going to bend around the mandrel. The distance from the mandrel to this bolt should be just slightly larger than the diameter of the wire that you intend to bend. Now, after we threaded and tapped this bolt into the base block, I took a round file and I simply created a slight impression on the inside to keep my wire from popping out when I'm trying to bend it. The handle is just as simple. It's a piece of bar that has a hole drilled in it that will freely turn on my mandrel. I've also drilled and tapped a hole through the bar stock and installed a hex cap screw. You'll notice that this hex cap screw has also been relieved with a round file to keep my wire from popping out while I'm bending. When you make your bender, do a better job than I did here. I didn't give enough room for this hex cap screw to clear this stud. Now I have to deal with it every time it goes around. It kind of bumps. If you put this hex cap screw far enough away from the mandrel hole so that it clears this stud, you're going to be much happier than I am with mine. I'll have to change this one at some point. The proper material for making a torsion spring would be music wire. You can order it in any diameter wire you need. This happens to be 1/4 inch. This music wire is spring steel, and even in 1/4 inch diameter, I'm able to bend it fairly easily with a relatively short bending handle. Before I started bending my music wire, I took some 1/4 inch mild steel and I made a pattern of the spring that I'm going to be using. Pretty easy to tell which one's made out of mild steel and which one's made out of music wire. The one that's made out of mild steel stays wrapped tightly around the mandrel and doesn't turn very easily. The spring that I made out of music wire retains enough memory that it creates a slightly looser fit around the mandrel. Now, repeatability on my project was an issue. I needed 6 of these springs. So when I made my pattern, I kept track of where my bends started. In this case, I started with an 18-inch piece of music wire and I marked a reference point 4 inches from one end of the piece of music wire. I also transferred that mark onto my bender. As long as I gave the spring the same number of turns, I ended up with the same spring length every time. Hey, if you could take a second and bump that like button and subscribe, you wouldn't believe how much that helps our channel. We sure appreciate it. Now with this design, I also needed a loop on the end of the torsion spring so that I could bolt my shooting targets onto it. That was able to be done with the same bender. I simply gave it one turn and then adjusted it a little bit so it stood directly above the spring. There you have it. Quick, easy, and inexpensive. There's no reason to be afraid of making your own springs.